is just sort of, this is my opinion. You can agree or disagree. This is a tier list mostly of their design, not necessarily how good they are on a team. That might play a factor on some of these, but most of it's going to be from a design standpoint. So you can throw me a comment here saying, "Oh, you're completely wrong," or, you know. But Gen 1. I can't talk about Ivysaur without talking about Bulbasaur. Ivysaur I like a lot because it still looks kind of cool looking. Very obvious transition between these two, right? Bulbasaur with the little bulb and then it grows into a flower, and I like that aspect of it. Wartortle I think actually looks better than Squirtle. These extra things make him look like he's going to do something cool. For whatever reason, Charmeleon is just way too angsty, right? He's like the angsty teenager. I'm gonna look cool, but I don't really care that I look cool, you know? Venusaur goes down a little bit. And I'll go ahead and say Blastoise too. Blastoise goes down a little bit too. Well, no, I'll put it here. The reason I had a problem deciding that is these two have a very similar problem going on. So I like artwork for Blastoise leading up to the first introduction of the 3D form of Blastoise and the cartoon form of Blastoise. Once you start looking at the Pokemon Stadium, Blastoise cannons go from being super extra large to being very, very tiny. And his face just looks really derpy. And from that point forward, that's kind of what they go with. Venusaur is the reverse effect. The early sprites for Venusaur I don't particularly like because it doesn't match the transition Bulbasaur to Ivysaur as well. The 3D Venusaur, you get a much better idea of its girth. Venusaur started out looking bad. 3D actually improved him, whereas Blastoise started out looking good, and the 3D made him look worse. So, and Charizard is garbage. If your favorite Pokemon is Charizard, I'm going to give you a hard time. Charizard's right here. He's with the rest of them. He's good. He's not great. I like his design. I don't think they necessarily did him bad in the 3D games or the sprites. I don't think he's terrible. I just don't think he's great either. Gen 2. This is where the hot takes are going to come from. Cyndaquil. Cyndaquil's cute, yet still looks dangerous, you know? So it's kind of cool. And I'll even go ahead and jump ahead a little bit and say Quilava is about the same. Because it still has that same feel. It gets that angsty kind of thing going that Charmeleon has, but it's more believable coming from Quilava, right? Because Charmeleon's like, I'm just too cool for this, you know. I don't care if you don't like me. I'm cool. Whereas Quilava's like, what? In fact, I might even put Quilava up here, right? Typhlosion, meh. He's not Charmeleon level bad. There's something about Typhlosion that just doesn't quite mesh for me, because he went from like a porcupine thing to a thing standing on two legs with the giant fire collar. I got bigger and I decided to get rid of my tail. Okay. Also worth noting, Typhlosion in the 3D games like X and Y and Sun and Moon at least, the collar does not light up all the time for some reason. That version kind of goes down here, but I'm gonna leave him here because that doesn't happen in all the games. Totodile, derpy derp. Cute, but it's trying too hard to be cute, so it winds up looking dumb. And I had friends in middle school who liked this thing and were like, it's the coolest Pokemon ever, and I'm like, no. Croconaw I actually like. Croconaw I think manages to do the same thing Quilava does, and like the cool angsty teenager thing, but not so cool and angsty and whatnot that he comes across as a doofus. Overall, I think Croconaw looked pretty good. If they had kept with this motif, I think they probably would have been okay. And they sort of did, but then they didn't. Every single sprite or character art of this thing makes him look like a giant doofus. It should look more like this, not more like that. It's probably a perfectly fine Pokemon. I've never used him for any amount of time because he looks like such a dork. Last one, I'll go in reverse. This one also looks like a doofus. Meganium is a huge doofus. That flower petal thing, collar thing, is really, really dumb. They shouldn't have done that. Especially when you take a look at the rest of its evolutionary line. I think Bayleaf looks really good. I mean, out of your middle evolutions from starters, this looks pretty cool. I wish they would have just, kept with this a little bit more. Like, make these leaves instead of a flower. Like, somebody had a great idea, and then it's like, okay, what do we do next? Well, it looks too cool. I guess now we gotta make it stupid. And here's the hot take. Ready? Despite being probably the worst starter to pick in Gen 2, Chikorita is my S tier. This is the cutest gosh darn starter they have ever made. It looks nothing like what it eventually becomes, and I think that's to its benefit, because it is so gosh darn cute. It's cuter than any of the Gen 1s, and it's cuter than anybody else that we're going to talk about later. And then it gets slightly worse, but it's understandable because it's got to lose some of its cuteness. And then it goes herp-a-derp. Any starter came back as a branched evolution. I want this one to come back and give it a new final form. Hoenn, Torchic, Mudkip, and Trico. Most of these I don't have strong feelings for. Yeah, Torchic's going to go here. It's very similar to Cyndaquil in that it's cute. Still looks like it could be dangerous. Mudkip, I think, is a little herpaderp, but it's not too bad. I'm just not getting much out of Trico, so I guess he just goes here. Yeah, Combuskin will stay there. This actually goes up. The second form is actually much better than the first. This goes down. That is really, really bad. He has to go through a really bad teenager phase before he gets good. Yeah, we'll put Blaziken up here. I really like Blaziken. I choose Torchic more often than I choose anything else. I have the only other starter that I have ever played through with was Mudkip. And Swampert's pretty cool, but not like uber cool. Just kind of, final form's there too. Gen 4, Piplup, Chimchar, Turtwig. This is a bit of a spoiler, but Turtwig is one of my favorite Pokemon lines. But Turtwig itself is not one of my favorites. So he goes up here because he's still really cute, but he's not as cute as Chikorita, let's be fair. His second stage is not very good, though. But Torterra is probably my second favorite Pokemon of all time. Just because the grass-ground combination makes him really, really fun. And I realize it's to my detriment that I tend to pick this in a Gen 4 game every time. But I like it. I think it's awesome. Okay, so these two are actually not that bad. I know a lot of people would put Piplup much higher, but Piplup doesn't do much for me. I'll admit that it's cuter than Chimchar, but it doesn't do a whole lot for me. Prinplup doesn't do much for me either. Empoleon, what the heck were they thinking? I mean, it sort of looks cool, but then it also looks kind of dumb. Maybe here? Put it in the top of the D tier. This is also looked really bad. And Fernape's okay. He loses a few points being the same type as Blaziken, but he is also one of the very few fire types in Gen 4. Go figure. Gen 5, the Lost Generation. The one that I did not actually play any games for. I am familiar with these, I just never used them on a team. My favorite is Tepig. It's kind of cool. He's not quite as cool as Torchic, I guess. I don't know what they were thinking with this. Because apparently he can take the shell off and then use it as a weapon? He's going to go in the dirt category. Snivy looks okay. Not quite sure where you're going with it, but Snivy looks okay. And in fact, I'll also say his final form Superior looks okay. Actually, this one looks okay too. I haven't seen this one very often. So this actually doesn't look that bad. The only really weird thing is that it goes from having arms and legs to not having any appendages at all. This is getting out of the dirt category. Yeah, Samurott looks okay. So Samurot's back here underneath me. Pignite. Pignite is right about here. Embor is actually up here. Despite the fact that he's the same typing as Blaziken, I think Embor looks pretty cool, and I get the character reference here of it being Zhongfei. Gen 6. I feel really bad for Chespin, because I think Chespin, design-wise, is fine. He's not great, and nobody would ever want to pick him because he's not very good for many of the gyms. In fact, what they end up doing with him later is we'll see. I think he did. For most people, I guess he's just underwhelming. I mean, he looks fine. He's not great. And then Fennekin, I really like. I think I like it better than most of these. So right about here with Cyndaquil. Frogadier, I'll give it points for the fact that it looks a lot more like Greninja, so that you can much more easily see the transition. But that's only knocking him up to this tier. So Greninja's probably, he's one of the better ones up here. Not super top tier or anything. I like Greninja, I just don't love Greninja, you know. This thing, I have no idea what they were thinking of with this thing. This design is fine if it's a girl. If it's a girl, if your Fennekin is a girl, then Braxton is right about there. If your Fennekin is a dude, Braxton is down here. It's very clear they wanted this to be very effeminate. It makes most sense if your Fennekin's a girl, and then it evolves into Braxton. And then Delphox is the same thing. Chestnut, again, I think Chespin is kind of, you know, underappreciated. I think Chestnut actually looks pretty cool. I think it was an interesting design. I think the typing is a really interesting idea. It's just, it showed up in the wrong generation, I think is what it boiled down to. Because the grass fighting type was not very good for what he had to deal with. So, Gen 7. Rowlet is cute as a button. Goes right there. Popplio's not bad. Kind of cute. It's kind of like Froakie. There's a little bit of a derp there, but it's kind of going for that anyway, you know? Litten is another one of those where I just don't get much out of. In fact, I'll put Popplio here and then Litten down here. I mean, that's sort of the aesthetic it's going for. Litten, I just don't get a good read on at all, and then this does nothing for me too. Dartrix is interesting. I don't think it's as good of a design here, but I mean, it's sort of got its own flair going on there, and then this is just absolutely bonkers. So I don't care if you're going for derp. That's a little too derp. You got too much derp in my derp. Okay, so Incineroar, this is the one everybody wants to know about, right? I had been introduced to these two guys, Incineroar and Decidueye, prior to actually playing the 7th generation. It seems like everybody had strong opinions about these, so a lot of people liked Incineroar. Incineroar doesn't do much for me. I don't think he's dumb looking. He just, much like everything else in this line, he just doesn't do anything for me. Decidueye is the one I wound up playing through the game with, and Decidueye is the one that I feel is kind of meh. I mean, he's good, he's not great. I don't see how you go from that to that very well. He's an archer, he's the only archer Pokemon ever. Maybe there was a reason there weren't archer Pokemon, you know? It's kind of a weird aesthetic to go for. We'll just put it down here with Charizard, because I don't think it's any better than Charizard in terms of aesthetics. It's going for something very specific, and I don't think that went very well. And then, because I actually like this idea that it's a mermaid Pokemon, kind of, and then on top of that, it's a fairy type, which none of the starters up to this point had fairy type, because, well, it only got introduced in Gen 6, but, you know, I thought that was probably a good call. They didn't give me all Gen 8's Pokemon. Grookey was my first one, and Grookey is probably here. Not great. Not terrible. Not too goofy. But just kind of there. Sobble's kind of the same way. Scorbunny, slightly better. Scorbunny has a lot more attitude than the other two at the very beginning. Their second forms, for all three of them, their second forms are really odd looking. They're not quite in derp territory, but if they were on here, now Grookey's would go down here. His second form, and then Sobble's second form would probably go down here too because it looks really goofy. And Scorbunny's would probably be down here. Cinderace would probably stay here, and Rillaboom would be up here, and Inteleon would probably be up here too. I don't have really strong opinions about the Gen 8 starters, I guess, because I thought Rillaboom was really cool looking, and then I realized that it just gets a bunch of normal attacks. So he's a little underwhelming toward the end of the game. And then, whereas Cinderace is really, really good at the end of the game, and then Inteleon is just, he's Inteleon, he's fine. So there is my shenanigans. Most of them ended up sort of in the middle here. The worst offenders seem to be water types, oddly enough. I mean, I got Meganium and 2 middle evolutions of grass types. And middle evolutions. The middle evolutions are always the hardest, I think, because you can probably have a really cute idea and a really cool idea, and you gotta find something in between to make them fit. So I'd probably say that the ones like Bayleaf and Quilava were probably some of the ones that were much harder to design for. Don't go anywhere.